When I told my sister I wouldn't babysit her kids on our family vacation, she called me a traitor. She said I was ruining everything, selfish, ungrateful, dramatic. But what she didn't know was that her husband was about to uncover the truth she'd been hiding for years. And that moment, it changed our entire family forever. This isn't just a story about saying no. It's about what happens when the quiet one finally speaks up and refuses to go back. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 28 years old and I live in Portland, Oregon. I work as an interior designer at a boutique firm downtown. It's not a job that makes headlines, but it's mine. I built my career from scratch, client by client, idea by idea. I rent my own apartment, pay my own bills, and live a life that by most measures is quiet and independent. But to my family, I'm the one without responsibilities. Not because I'm careless or unreliable. No, simply because I'm not married and I don't have kids. In my family's unspoken rulebook, that makes me the free agent, the available one, the one who should be able to drop everything at any time to help out. Especially when it comes to my older sister, Jessica. Jessica is 32, married to Ryan, and they have 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, all under the age of 6. She lives just a short drive from my parents' house in the same suburb we grew up in. Jessica is what most people would call the center of the family. She's loud, assertive, charismatic. She has a way of making her needs sound like facts. And growing up, my parents never corrected that I was the opposite, the good daughter, the easy one. From as far back as I can remember, my role was to keep the peace. If Jessica wanted something, I was expected to let her have it. If she got overwhelmed, I was the one to step in, be the bigger person. Claire, my mum would say, even when I was 6 and Jessica was 10, "Help your sister, she needs you." And I did. I helped her study for math tests in middle school, even though she called me a nerd. I lent her my clothes even though she never returned them. I picked her up from late parties when I was barely old enough to drive. And every time I asked why I had to be the one to compromise, the answer was always the same. Because you're the easy one, Claire. You're strong. Jessica just needs a little more support. Somehow easy became my whole identity. It didn't stop in childhood. After college, when I was juggling 2 jobs to make rent, I still got calls from my mum asking if I could drive over to Jessica's house and help watch the kids. Just for an hour, she'd say, "Jess is swamped, and Ryan's out of town." The hour would stretch into 4. Dinner would need to be made, diapers changed, homework reviewed. Then I'd drive back home, late exhausted, and no one would even say thank you, because that's what family does, right? You help. You don't keep score. You don't complain. One afternoon, 2 years ago, I had an interview for a job I'd been eyeing for months, an opening at a sustainable design studio that was known for its creative freedom. I had practiced answers to every possible question. I wore my best outfit. I felt ready. That morning, Jessica called Claire. "I know this is last minute, but can you come over? Anna's running a fever and I can't bring her to daycare. Ryan has a client meeting and I have to take the twins to their dentist appointment." I told her about the interview. She paused. Then she said, "Can't you reschedule it? They'll understand. This is an emergency." I hesitated for too long, and that was all it took. "Please, Claire," she added. "You're the only one I can count on." I don't know if it was guilt habit or some deep programming, but I said, yes, I missed the interview. The studio hired someone else, and when I told my mum about it later, she just said, "There'll be other jobs, but your sister really needed you today." That was the moment I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to fully admit. I was never the priority. Not to them. I was the backup plan, the filler, the peacekeeper, the unpaid support system. And the worst part, I had trained them to expect it, by always saying yes, by always showing up. I'd made it easy for them to never consider my needs. Now, at 28, people outside my family see me as independent, grounded. even strong. But inside that family dynamic, I still carry the same label I did when I was 12, the good daughter, which in our household translates to the one who doesn't complain. But lately, something has been shifting. I've started asking myself questions I used to avoid, like why does love in this family feel so conditional? Why is silence expected from the ones who give the most? And why is it only my rest that's considered optional? There's a line I once read in a book that stuck with me. When you're always there for everyone else, sometimes you forget what it feels like to be there for yourself. I've forgotten what that feels like. All I know is I've been living my life like a backup plan, and no one ever asked me if I wanted to be one. When my mum first floated the idea of a family vacation to the coast, I remember feeling hopeful. It was early spring last year and I was running on fumes. Work had been relentless. 2 major projects, back-to-back long nights, drafting floor plans, managing demanding clients who couldn't decide between walnut or oak. The idea of the beach of slowing down even for a few days sounded like a lifeline. So when Mum texted the group chat with family trip to Cannon Beach in June, followed by 3 sun emojis, I said yes. But I made one thing clear, I'll pay my own way, I replied. And I'll need to take time off work, so please let me know the dates ASAP. I booked my PTO a full month in advance. I even picked out a list of things I wanted to do. Visit a coastal art gallery, walk the tide pools at sunrise, maybe even write in my journal with a cup of strong coffee, while the waves whispered nearby. This was supposed to be a vacation. For me? But that's not how it turned out. When we arrived at the rental house, Jessica and Ryan immediately claimed the master suite. It had a king-sized bed, a private balcony overlooking the ocean, and an ensuite bathroom with a soaking tub. "It's just easier if the kids are near us," Jessica said with a wave of her hand. But within minutes, she passed me a key card and pointed to the room at the end of the hallway. It had 2 bunk beds, bright plastic bed sheets, toy bins stacked in the corner, and 3 little backpacks lined up like marching soldiers. "Claire, you'll be staying here with the kids." Mum smiled. "That way they won't bother your sister too much." I blinked. "Wait, what?" But before I could fully process, the twins burst into the room, already arguing over who got the top bunk. The youngest threw his shoes in a corner and asked if I brought snacks. My mum was already halfway down the hallway. "You're great with them," she called over her shoulder. "And besides, you're not picky, you're the easy one." That night I didn't sleep. One child kicked off the covers in their sleep, another kept mumbling about a lost stuffed elephant, and the third got up at 2 a.m. and cried because he wanted apple juice. I sat on the floor in the dark, half asleep, Googling how to fix a night light, while Jessica posted an Instagram story of herself drinking wine in a spa robe. The next morning I tried to slip out for a walk on the beach, just 30 minutes alone. I was tying my shoes when I got a text. "Jessica, hey, can you watch the boys? Ryan and I are heading into town for coffee and a massage. Shouldn't be long." I froze. I hadn't even left the house. "Still," I said yes. Again. 3 hours later, I was still in that cramped room, wiping yogurt off a child's chin while Jessica posted another boomerang of her mimosa brunch. That night, I stood in the tiny upstairs bathroom, the one with the broken lock and water pressure that screamed more than it flowed. I sat on the edge of the tub and cried, not loud, not messy, just quiet, steady tears that I didn't want anyone to hear. And from the hallway outside, I heard laughter. Jessica's voice bright and bubbly, calling Ryan to come. Look at a video. I heard my mum's voice too. This is so nice, isn't it? It's been forever since we all got away together. I felt invisible. The next morning, when I finally tried to push back, I approached Mum while she was packing a beach bag. "Can I just have a few hours to myself today?" I asked. "I really wanted to check out that gallery in town." She didn't even look up. "Claire, don't make this difficult. Your sister's already overwhelmed. You know how she gets. Just help out a little. You're so good with the boys. But this isn't just a trip for them, I said, trying not to raise my voice. I took time off work for this too. She finally looked at me. Sweetheart, you're staying for free? Don't act like it's such a burden. You're the most easygoing one here. Remember, I almost laughed. But it wasn't funny. That afternoon I sat with the boys while they watched cartoons and threw goldfish crackers on the floor. I picked them up one by one, not even angry anymore, just numb. It hit me then I wasn't on vacation, I was on duty. The thing no one seemed to understand was that I wasn't resisting helping. I wasn't being difficult. I just wanted rest too, just a little space. One morning without a child yelling my name. 1 hour that belonged to no one but me. But instead, I was the one filling in the cracks. The invisible glue. The live-in babysitter without a name tag. That night, I journaled quietly after everyone had gone to bed. I didn't write much, just one line. I came here to breathe, but instead I'm holding my breath for everyone else. That was the moment something shifted. It wasn't loud. It didn't come with screaming or rebellion. It was just stillness. A decision made in silence. And deep in that silence, I promised myself, never again like this. Spring came again, softer this time. At work, things were calmer. My projects steadier, my apartment cozier, my mornings quieter. I'd kept to myself since that vacation at Cannon Beach, not because I was angry, but because I hadn't yet found the right words to say what I truly felt. Then one afternoon, a message popped up in our family group chat. Mum, summer trip is on. We've booked a beautiful beach house in Manzanita. Same week as last year. Can't wait. Below her message were photos. An ocean view home, 3 bedrooms, a shared itinerary. Jessica replied immediately with a "Yay!" followed by a string of surf emojis. Ryan sent a thumbs up. Dad reacted with a heart. I stared at the screen. No one had asked if I was free. No one checked if I could get time off work. It was just assumed, like it always was, that I would fall in line. Again, for a moment, I almost did. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, ready to type. Sounds great, just like I had every other year. But this time, something inside me paused and then pushed back. I deleted the message draft. I opened a browser tab, booked a modest but clean hotel just a few miles from the beach house, one with quiet rooms and a no pets policy. Then I took a deep breath and wrote my response. Me thanks for organising, Mum. I've gone ahead and booked my own place nearby. I'll be driving myself this year. Less than 3 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Mum. Her voice came through the speaker, lined with confusion and subtle panic. Claire, what do you mean you booked your own place? I already arranged the rooms. You're riding with us, aren't you? I'm not, I said calmly. Last year I didn't really get a vacation. I barely slept. I missed everything I looked forward to. This year I want my own space. There was silence on the line. Then came the guilt. But that means you're separating from the family, Mum said, her voice dropping an octave. Jessica will have to manage the kids on her own. Who's going to help when she needs a break? I'm not disappearing, Mum. I'll still join for dinner's activities, but I'm not a built-in helper. I need time for myself too. Another pause. Then came the sigh. You've changed, Claire. No, I replied. I've just started listening to myself. That night, I got the text from Jessica Long, emotional familiar. Jessica, I just don't understand you anymore. After everything I've gone through this year, working raising 3 kids, you'd think my own sister would step up like before. But no, you've become cold, distant. All I wanted was a nice family trip, and now you're acting like you were deeply wronged last time. Are you seriously prioritizing your alone time over your family? I read it 3 times. The first time I felt the old guilt creep in. The second time I felt angry. But the third time I felt something different, detached. For once I saw the pattern clearly. Jessica wasn't asking me for help, she was demanding it, and the price of saying no, being called a traitor. I didn't respond right away. I closed the message and sat on my balcony as the city lights flickered on across the skyline. My tea grew cold beside me. I needed to release something. Not to get attention. Not to shame anyone, but to breathe. To make sense of this ache inside me that kept being dismissed as selfishness. So I opened Reddit, a throwaway account. No name, no location. And I typed AITA for refusing to stay in the same house as my sister and her kids during our family vacation. I wrote about last year how I slept in a room with 3 kids while my sister got her own suite, how I was expected to watch the kids while they got spa days, how I took PTO and paid for my own travel, only to be treated like a babysitter. I kept it vague. No names, no family drama, bombs, just the facts. And at the end, I asked, is it wrong to want a real vacation for myself? I almost didn't post it, but I did. Within an hour, the responses started trickling in. You're not the AH. You're a saint for not snapping. Girl, that wasn't a vacation. That was free childcare. You should have set these boundaries years ago. By morning, the post had blown up. Hundreds of comments, dozens of people sharing their own stories of being the single sibling expected to sacrifice the quiet daughter who always said yes, the one whose needs came last. I read every word. Not because I needed validation, though it helped, but because for the first time in years I felt seen. Not by people who knew me, but by people who knew exactly how I felt. And that was everything. Later that day, Jessica texted again, this time just 4 words. Did you write that I didn't answer? Because in that moment, it didn't matter what she thought. What mattered was that for once I had said something, not just to the world, but to myself. And I wasn't backing down. I wasn't expecting it to take off. It was late, and I was sitting cross-legged on the couch, laptop, open hair still damp from the shower. I had poured everything into that post, but I figured it would just disappear into the sea of other anonymous confessions, another story lost in the void. But I was wrong. By morning I had over 200 notifications. Strangers from around the world were reading my words and responding. Fast. Not the AH, not even close. This hit too hard. I've been you and I still am, I cried, reading this. I didn't even know how badly I needed to hear it. Some shared their own stories about sisters who turned them into unpaid nannies. Mothers who saw their silence as consent families who called it betrayal the moment they said no. Others simply said, "You're not alone." And for the first time in my life, I believed them. I sat at the kitchen table in complete stillness, rereading the comments one by one slowly. It was like opening a window in a room I didn't realize had gone stuffy. I hadn't just posted to be heard. I had posted to breathe. And now I wasn't just breathing. I was exhaling years of invisible weight. But freedom has its costs. Later that day, my phone rang. I didn't need to check the caller ID. It was Jessica, I answered. "Hey!" Her voice came sharp. No greeting. Just a demand. "Did you write that Reddit post?" I didn't flinch. "You recognized it was me?" You described everything, Claire. It's not subtle. Do you have any idea how this makes me look? I stayed silent for a beat. Then I said carefully, it wasn't about making anyone look bad. I didn't name names. I didn't say where we were. I just told my story. Well, everyone knows it's about me. Ryan's co-workers saw it. People from the PTA saw it. You made me into some kind of villain. I could hear the tremble beneath her anger. But I didn't let it shake me. I didn't make anyone say anything. I said calmly, people are reacting to the story because they've lived it too. Jessica scoffed. You're so self-righteous. You think you're brave. What you did was selfish and dramatic. No, I said, voice steady. What I did was honest. For once, there was a silence on the other end. I almost thought she'd hung up. Then she spoke again, softer this time, but not weaker, bitter. You humiliated me in front of the entire internet. I told the truth, I replied. A truth I've swallowed for years. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean it didn't happen. She didn't respond. Just ended the call with a curt whatever, but I didn't feel that familiar pit of guilt. This time I didn't spiral. I didn't go back to rereading the comments just to make myself feel justified. I just sat still, solid in my skin. A little sad, yes, but grounded. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. My mum called. Her tone was tight. No, hello, Claire. Did you really post about our family on the internet? I took a breath. Yes, I did. She exhaled like she was holding her breath. That was private. Family should stay family. You embarrassed your sister. No, I said, choosing every word. She embarrassed herself. I just stopped covering for her. There was silence. Then the disappointment came, gently wrapped but sharp beneath. I just think, you could have been more grateful Jessica's going through so much. You could have helped more. That was it. That sentence, I did help. I said almost in a whisper. I helped more than anyone ever asked her to help me. And no one cared when I was exhausted. No one even noticed. You all only saw me when I was useful, Claire. I'm tired of being the helper, I said. I'm tired of being quiet so everyone else can feel okay. She paused. Then something changed. Her voice softened for the first time. I read the comments, I blinked. You what? I read them. The ones under your post. I didn't expect to. I just wanted to see what people were saying. And I didn't think strangers would agree with you. I thought you were exaggerating. There it was again. That familiar ache of having to prove I wasn't too sensitive just to be taken seriously. How many times have I exaggerated, Mum? I asked gently. She didn't answer. Instead, she said, we need to talk, all of us. But I didn't rush to respond. I wasn't going to fill in silence just because it made someone else uncomfortable. That evening, I got a text from Ryan. Ryan, I read the post too, I'm sorry. You were taken advantage of. I've already talked to Jess. She needs to hear it from someone else, and I'm not letting her avoid it anymore. For the first time in a long time, I felt like someone had my back. Not because they had to, but because they saw me. 2 days after Ryan texted me, he called. His voice was calm but deliberate. Claire, can we meet? Just us? I didn't know what to expect. I hadn't seen Ryan one-on-one in ever really. He was always around. Jessica, orbiting her needs, her plans, her moods. Polite, but distant. The kind of brother-in-law who looked down at his phone during dinner conversations. But now here he was, suggesting coffee at a quiet cafe just outside of town. I agreed. When I arrived, he was already there. No laptop, no phone out, just sitting with both hands wrapped around a mug like someone bracing for impact. He stood when he saw me. Awkward, but genuine. Thanks for coming, he said. I sat down across from him, heart guarded but curious. I read the post. He started skipping all pleasantries. I read it, and I believed every word. I nodded once, unsure where this was going. Ryan looked at me. Really? Looked at me for probably the first time in our lives. I need to say something, I'm sorry. I blinked. For what? For letting all of this go on, he said, for not noticing, for not speaking up. He ran a hand through his hair. I thought I was being neutral, you know. Stay out of family stuff. Let Jess and your mum figure things out. But I see now. Silence isn't neutral when someone's being used. I sat back stunned. I wasn't used to anyone, especially from that side of the family, saying something so clear, he continued. I asked Jess last night about the money. The time she told me she gave you cash for watching the kids, the envelopes, the thank you gifts. I looked at him already knowing there were none. Were there? He asked. I shook my head slowly. Pizza money. Once. That was it. He exhaled hard, pressing his palm to his face. She lied to me every single time I asked. Said she left envelopes on the counter or gave you Venmo. She even described the handwriting on a note. I gave a small, humorless laugh. If she wrote a thank you note, it must have been to herself. Ryan didn't laugh. He just looked deflated. I confronted her. She cried. Then she got defensive, then quiet. And finally, she admitted it. I didn't say anything right away. I felt no victory, no vindication, just the same tired ache that had settled in my chest years ago and never really left. I don't even blame you, I said softly. But I can't pretend I'm not tired. I'm not angry, Ryan. I'm just exhausted. It's been so long since I've been allowed to just be Claire. Not the helper, not the easy one. Just me. He nodded. I get it. At least I'm starting to. There was a pause, then he said, She wants to talk to you. I raised an eyebrow. Jessica? He nodded. She said she's coming by your place later. I don't know what she'll say. But I told her if she's not ready to really own it, don't bother. I didn't respond. I wasn't sure how I felt about seeing her. But that evening, just as the sun dipped behind the trees, I heard a knock on my apartment door. I opened it to find Jessica standing there. No makeup. Puffy eyes, a manila envelope in her hand. Ryan behind her, silent. She looked small, not in stature, but in energy, like someone who'd spent too many days pretending and had finally run out of script. I'm sorry, she said quietly, almost too softly to hear. I didn't answer. I didn't trust my voice yet. For taking advantage of you, for lying, for turning every family trip into something that made you smaller. She handed me the envelope. This is the money I owe you, all of it. Ryan made me recalculate everything. I triple-checked. I took it, but didn't open it. The number didn't matter to me. It never had. Jessica looked at me, eyes glistening. I don't expect things to go back to normal, but I need you to know I've started therapy. That caught my attention. Ryan found someone. She specializes in family systems. We had our first session yesterday. It was hard. But I need it. I nodded slowly. You don't have to fix everything in one day, I said. But if you can start by respecting people, especially the quiet ones, that's more than enough. She nodded, and for the first time, she didn't look like my commanding older sister. She looked like someone trying to figure out who she really was. Under all that weight, Ryan gave a small nod of his own. No words. Just a kind of silent gratitude. When they left, I sat on my couch holding the envelope in my lap like it might vanish. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. It wasn't about the money. It was about something deeper. Finally cracking open. A mirror had been held up, and for once I wasn't the only one looking into it. 3 weeks after the envelope, I got a call from Dad. Nothing dramatic, no tension, just a gentle, almost sheepish offer. Your mum and I were thinking, We'd like to take you to dinner. Your favourite place. The Pines. Saturday. It wasn't just the restaurant that caught my attention. It was the way he asked. No assumptions, no guilt. No, we've already booked the table, just an invitation. A choice. I said yes. That evening, as I walked into the warmly lit space where the walls were lined with old wine bottles and the smell of roasted garlic filled the air, I saw my mum stand up and something rare pull out my chair. "We're sorry," she said, before the bread even arrived, "for minimizing your feelings, for giving you burdens that were never yours to carry." I didn't speak right away. I was letting the words land. Not because I didn't believe her, but because I needed to make space for the weight of finally being heard. Then Dad chimed in softly. "We're planning another trip. Same area. This time, you can travel separately, stay separately, join only what you want. No one will ask you to babysit. We promise." I looked at them both. "What about Jessica?" Mum glanced at Dad before replying. "She's still in therapy," Ryan convinced her. "And she's beginning to realize she needs to change." I nodded. "Slowly I'll go," I said, "but I'm driving myself, booking my own room. And if anyone tries to pull me back into the babysitter role, I will leave. No warning, no discussion." "We understand," Dad said, and Mum gave a small, quiet nod. A few days later, a new message popped up in the family group chat. But this time, it didn't say, "Family trip, book your bags," or "Claire, can you bring toys for the boys?" Instead, it had a new name: Beach Trip, Reset Edition. Even Jessica's message was short, a simple, smiley face. No requests, no plans. I booked a quiet hotel half a mile from the main house, close enough for dinner, far enough for peace. When the morning of the trip arrived, I made my coffee, slowly packed my bag, and drove off before the sun fully rose. No one texted to rush me, no reminders, no obligations. When I arrived and checked in, I asked the front desk for a little extra privacy. If anyone asks for my room number, I said, "Please don't share unless it's law enforcement." The receptionist smiled. "Happens more than you think. You're good." That afternoon, we met for dinner at a seafood spot overlooking the beach. Everyone was there. Jessica, Ryan, the kids, and standing beside them, cheerful and composed, was a woman I hadn't met before. "This is Ava," Jessica introduced the nanny. I blinked. Not a cousin, not a neighbour, a real hired professional nanny. That alone felt like a miracle. Ava smiled and sat with the kids at a separate table, giving them colouring books and gentle reminders to finish their meals. No one asked me to take someone to the bathroom. No one handed me a baby wipe. Jessica turned to me, voice low. "Thanks for coming," she said. No strings attached. I nodded. Dinner passed without incident. No tension, no guilt, just stories, laughter, and for the first time in years, the space to just be myself. I told Dad about a boutique hotel I was redesigning. He actually listened, asked questions. Not once did he change the subject to Jessica's kids. That night, I went back to my hotel alone, unlocked my room, and breathed in the stillness like it was sacred. The next morning, sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains. No one pounded on my door. No one cried for cereal. I stretched, made coffee, and sat on the balcony with a book I'd bought months ago but never started. Around 10 a.m., my phone buzzed. Ava. "Hi, Claire. I'm so sorry to bother you, but Jessica asked me to call. She said it's urgent and wanted to see if you could watch the kids for about 15 minutes. My stomach dropped, not in fear, just in recognition. Here it was. The test. I took a breath, calm and clear. "Ava," I replied gently, You're doing a great job. But I'm not the backup babysitter. If Jessica had something urgent, she should have planned for it. That's not on me. Ava hesitated, then replied, Totally understand. Sorry for the trouble. A minute later, I sent a quick message to Ryan. Me. Jessica asked Ava to call me about watching the kids. Just a heads up. Ryan, I'll handle it. Thank you. That afternoon, when I arrived late to the seaside park, the mood was different. Jessica didn't meet my eyes. Ryan was playing soccer with the kids. Mum offered me a lemonade with a quiet, "We heard what happened." "I'm sorry. That shouldn't have happened." I nodded. Nothing more. Later, under the shade of a cypress tree, Jessica approached. Her voice wasn't sharp this time, just tired. "Thank you for not making a scene earlier." I looked at her evenly. I don't need to raise my voice for someone to realize what shouldn't be done. "I've said enough," she nodded. Ryan, a few feet away, gave a small look of agreement. From that moment on, no one asked again, not even for 5 minutes. The next few days were surprisingly peaceful. I wandered into local bookstores, sat in cafes with 2 sweet lattes, and took long walks along the cliffs. When I joined family dinners or outings, it was by choice, not expectation, and that made all the difference. On the final evening, as the sun dipped low and cast long golden streaks across the water, the entire family gathered on the beach. Jessica sat next to me, not dominating the space, not issuing orders, just sitting. "You've changed," she said quietly. And I think I'm starting to learn to accept that I didn't say anything. Because the truth was, I had changed. But more importantly, I'd stayed changed. A few weeks after we returned from the trip, I was back into my usual rhythm. Design proposals, fabric samples, muted phone calls. The world spun again like it always had, the ordinary humming louder than any personal revelation. But I was different. Not louder, not angrier, just more whole. Like a puzzle piece that had finally stopped trying to fit the wrong outline. One Thursday afternoon, while reviewing lighting specs for a boutique hotel renovation, I got a notification on my phone Instagram message request from @bookbindemma. My heart jumped, Emma. The name alone lit something up in me, small but distinct. Emma worked at the little bookshop near my apartment. I saw her almost every weekend. She was always quiet but kind with eyes that understood too much and never said too little. She had a way of placing the right book into your hands without needing a single question answered, Emma. "Hi, Claire. I don't know if it's coincidence or fate, but I read a post on Reddit last month and I knew it was you." For a second, I froze. Then I read it again. She knew. My finger hovered above the reply box, unsure if I felt exposed or relieved. But then her next message arrived. "Emma, I didn't read it as gossip. I read it as strength. It reminded me of myself in ways I didn't expect. You weren't selfish. You were learning to love yourself, and I think that's the bravest kind of growth." Something in my chest cracked open. Not the kind of break that bleeds, but the kind that finally lets light in. I typed back, "Me. I guess that post travelled further than I thought, Emma." It did, because it was real, and because so many of us have been Claire in our families and never found the words, "We made plans to meet the following Saturday." Nothing fancy, just coffee and an art walk in the city centre. The kind of thing you don't overthink. I arrived a few minutes early and found her leaning against a mural wall, a canvas tote slung over her shoulder. Her fingers flipping through a dog-eared copy of The Bell Jar Hey. She smiled. "Hey," I said, smiling back. And just like that, The air between us felt easy. We walked side by side through rows of local artists' portraits, ceramics, stitched poems on cloth, and talked about everything from abstract expressionism to what it means to say no and still be loved. I didn't tell her how many nights I had cried because of Jessica, or how long it took for me to stop questioning whether I was the bad daughter. But I did tell her that I was learning slowly, stubbornly to believe that love doesn't have to come from sacrifice. She listened. And then she said something I've never forgotten. "You're not selfish, Claire. You're just finally choosing not to be erased." We sat under a tree outside the gallery with cups of lavender tea. She told me her own story, how she had once lived with a chronically ill sister and was expected to give up her college scholarship to stay home. She didn't, and her family never forgave her for it, but she forgave herself. That's when I knew. She said that some kinds of love demand your silence and others invite your voice. You chose the second. I looked at her for a long moment. Not because I was startled, but because I wasn't used to being understood so precisely. The rest of the afternoon passed like mist, light, cool, leaving no weight behind. When we parted ways, she simply said, "I'd like to do this again sometime." No pressure. No pressure. I hadn't realized how long I'd been holding my breath, waiting for expectations to come crashing down after something nice. That night back in my apartment, I sat in bed holding a book. Emma had recommended a collection of essays about reclaiming joy. I flipped to a page she'd bookmarked, and there in the margin she had scribbled, "You deserve ease too." And suddenly I understood. This ripple wasn't about viral posts or family politics. It wasn't about me proving I was right. It was about finally realizing that when you stand up for your peace, you give others permission to do the same. I wasn't just healing. I was becoming a mirror. Later that week, I received a handwritten card from my mum. Just one sentence. "Thank you for being patient with all of us, while learning to stop being patient with the things that hurt." I placed it next to the one Jessica had sent a month ago. 2 pieces of paper, simple, uneven in their handwriting. But together, they marked a turning point, not of perfection, but of progress. And somewhere between those letters and that lavender tea, something shifted inside me. I wasn't looking for approval anymore, or permission, or apology. I was learning how to choose peace, not as a prize, but as a practice. And maybe, just maybe, someone else was choosing it too. Autumn arrived softly, like someone knocking before entering. The leaves outside my apartment turned golden overnight, and the air carried that familiar scent of cinnamon wood smoke, and something else. Something quieter. Stillness. One evening after work, I came home to find a small envelope in my mailbox. The handwriting on the front was familiar, round, slightly tilted, unmistakably Jessica's. I opened it slowly, unsure of what I'd find. Inside was a simple card, cream-coloured, no designs. Just one sentence, handwritten in soft blue ink. "Thank you for not staying silent forever." I held the card longer than I meant to, not because it overwhelmed me, but because I understood the cost of writing it. Jessica wasn't fixed. She hadn't become someone new overnight, but she was doing the work, continuing therapy, reading, listening, pausing before reacting. The little things that don't shout transformation but whisper change. She'd stopped asking for favors too. No more sudden texts. No more just-a-minute requests. Sometimes she'd share a painting she'd done in a group art class or a podcast episode that helped her understand control in a new light. She was trying. Not perfectly, but honestly, and that for me was enough. My parents in their own way had shifted too. The first time Mum called and said, "Claire, are you free this weekend?" instead of, Can you help us with something? I nearly dropped the phone. It was a small change, but to me, it felt like stepping into a room that used to be locked from the inside. Dad began sending me photos of his backyard garden updates on the bench he was building, the herbs he'd planted without asking me to drive over and assemble anything. He just wanted to share. And for the first time I felt included, not enlisted. I didn't say it aloud, but I noticed it all and I let it come, slowly, cautiously, like learning how to walk barefoot again after years in heavy boots. One quiet Sunday afternoon, I was sitting in the backyard with Emma. The sun was low and the last of the summer warmth lingered in the air, like a kind guest refusing to leave too quickly. She leaned gently against my shoulder, her presence always easy, never demanding, never too much. She looked up at me and asked, "Do you think your family really gets it now?" I smiled at the sky, then turned to her, my voice steady. "They don't have to understand everything, they just need to respect it." And then I added softer, "And this time, I think they're learning how." She nodded and didn't say more. She didn't need to, because love, the kind that matters, never needs to be explained over and over again. It shows up in actions, in patience, in the spaces between words. Later that week, I was invited to a small weekend retreat with a few design colleagues. It was set at a coastal cottage just outside of town. Nothing fancy, just time by the water, long meals and sketchbooks filled with possibilities. I said yes. I packed lightly, like someone who knew she wouldn't need armor, just warm sweaters, a new journal, and a camera I hadn't used in years. On the final morning of the retreat, I woke early and walked down to the shore. The beach was empty, no laughter, no footsteps, just the sound of waves exhaling against the sand. I stood at the edge of the water, my toes sinking into the cool earth. The wind was gentle. The sky blushed faintly with the first light of day, and for once, no one called my name. No one handed me a diaper bag or asked me to find a missing shoe. No one looked for me because they needed something. I wasn't the backup plan. I wasn't the helper. I wasn't the easy one. I was just Claire, whole present, unclaimed by anyone but myself. I took a deep breath, steady and full. This is what it feels like to belong to yourself, and I wasn't giving that up again.